This is Jenny Larson conducting my first interview with Adrienne Dawes at the Susanna Dickinson Museum in Austin, Texas on September 13th, 2014. This interview is part of the Conversations to Create Unity oral history project conducted by the Susanna Dickinson Museum and Baylor University. We had a long conversation before we started recording this, so there'll probably be a lot of calling back that I do. Okay. But if you can start by just talking about your personal background, when you were born, where you were born, family history, just kind of flesh out that sort of Adrienne Dawes, the early years.
Okay. I was born in Corsicana, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas, and I lived with my biological parents there, and my father, who is a mechanic, had moved to Austin for work. He was actually commuting for a while back and forth between the two, but then ended up moving down here in Austin. And so my mother and I moved when I was about 1 year old to Austin. So I was born in 82, so that would have been 83, 84 that we were in Austin proper, and I don't know where we first lived. But they were together for a time. They ended up splitting up. And I believe my birth father either was still in Austin or maybe he moved back. But then I was here with my birth mother, who my parents were really young when I was born. My father was 16, my mother was 19. And that's just kind of normal in the family. That wasn't lots of I have lots of aunts and uncles in the family who were parents very young and were married many times. So my parents were both very teenagers when they had me, really. And my birth mother really kind of saw offering me up for adoption as a way to, there were obviously things she wanted to do. She wanted to go to college. She ended up going to Dartmouth. I mean, she was really, really smart and had a lot of things she wanted to do with her life. She was 19 years old when I was born. So it was that, and as well as just kind of ending a cycle of abuse that existed in my birth family. So kind of getting me out of Corsicana, getting me out of that environment, getting me in Austin, and then meeting my preschool teacher, Sean, who she knew that my preschool teacher had adopted a son. So she asked my preschool teacher if she'd be interested in adopting me as well. I was about 3 years old. And that happened very seamlessly. I have there's lots of Lifetime TV drama, oh my God, you know what I mean? It was so seamless. I just started going over to her house on weekends, and then it was for months at a time, and then I just lived there. And my mother, when I say my mother now, I mean my adopted mother, Sean, and her husband, Hank, were both white, and my brother and I, so I identify as mixed race, and my older brother, Gabriel, is Latino. And so we were living out in the hill country, and where nothing else existed but trees, and the house my father built. I can't remember if I went to school out there at all. Probably would have been like a year. But then we ended up moving to Austin proper when my adopted parents separated. And so my older brother and my mom and I lived in a house on Concordia Street in what we know kind of as the Cherrywood, French Place neighborhood. And and so I lived there for several years, went to Maplewood for first and second grade. Went to my mom's preschool where she taught at Open Door, which was, there was lots of locations around town at that time, but she was in charge of the infant center, which was also housed where the age building is. So it was like a older senior citizen sort of home also with this preschool. And she ran that program, and specifically for children with special needs. So we lived there, went to Maplewood, and then our family started to grow. My mom finished her position at Open Door and wanted to, she actually started fostering, I think, when she was at Open Door, started fostering children from the state who had special needs. And then kind of wanted to focus more on that, I think. I think that was one of the reasons she moved on from Open Door. She also been working there forever, and I just think that she wanted something different. And so we ended up buying a house over near the old airport, which is Mueller area now. And we've lived there since. They still live, my family all still lives in that house there. Only a few siblings have moved away But then she and my godmother, Becky, began adopting a lot of children. And the first few were kids who were foster youth that came in very young. And we had little kids that were usually special needs and foster kids. So our family grew to, there's 8 children in the family, plus my mother, godmother, and then along the line we also, I wouldn't say adopted, we assumed care of this woman, Darnell, who is deaf. And so we have I have a very alternative postmodern family. There's not names for a lot of the members of my family in terms of, I call my brother Nick my brother, but we actually are not, like, he was adopted by my godmother, so we're actually not at all linked in any sort of legal way, but we grew up as brother and sister, so we identify each other in that way. So yeah, we lived over by, and that neighborhood changed, of course, a lot as the airport moved out. I used to hear like planes going over with Saturday morning cartoons, and then that just stopped, which was really interesting. But I went to school. I went to school at Bland Elementary when we lived there, because that was the neighborhood school, and then went back to Maplewood for 6th grade when they stopped having. They started to move to have 6th grade with middle school, which my parents thought was a terrible idea. So they sent me to back to Maplewood. And then from Maplewood, I went to Keeling and crashed and burned there. Did not like that. And my parents put me in private school at Huntington, Surrey, which used to be in a little house over by campus and now is in a more formal building. But went to school there and then went on to live in New York and Chicago, and have been back and forth a few times, and I've just moved back from Chicago. It's been 2 years that I've been back.
So
Chicago.
I wonder if you could speak to Cherrywood then and now, but also Mueller then and now, because you had time there in both neighborhoods as a child, and then now you live in Cherrywood as an adult, and your mom still lives in Mueller's. Yeah. So maybe start with Cherrywood and then Mueller, but the then and now of both.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, Cherrywood, back in the day, as I remember, all the kids who I went to school with lived in that neighborhood. It was all really contained right there. We all walked to each other's houses. Our parents all knew each other. It just seemed like a really friendly, safe community. I would say it was really, really middle class. There wasn't a whole lot of families that were very, very affluent or very, very lower income. It was just kind of like situated right in the middle there, with my family kind of being on the lower end of that scale. But it seemed to be a really, and I still get the sense about Maplewood as a school that it's a great community school. There's a lot of people that live in that neighborhood, send their kids there, and it seems like it's still got that spirit. But yeah, I mean, I really love that neighborhood, and one of the reasons moving back, I pursued that as a place I wanted to live, just because I loved it so much. And then it was really quiet. It was just residential and just families and not a lot of business over there. And of course now, moving back as an adult, you have Maynard, which has just, started to blow up in terms of businesses and bars and coffee shops. And some of that I love because I love that stuff, but at the same time, I've noticed that, the chances that I will ever be able to afford to buy a property there are pretty much gone. There's no way I would be able to afford that. I'm renting a house now with a roommate, and even that, I wonder how long I'm going to be able to do that, because I pay a lot in rent for a really small space. And that moving back from Chicago and New York, one of the highlights is like, oh, in Austin you can get a house, and you can rent a house and have a yard and have all this space for so cheap, and the quality of life here allows you to hold down a day job and then pursue the artistic things that you want to do. That's the catch. It's what everyone's kind of, at least in my friend circle and generation, excited about. And you come home and you start to think, oh, this might not be how I left it. And I've only been gone about, this last round, I've only been gone about 4 years. But in that 4 years, it has changed so much that I do get nervous about. Part of me is like, I got to stay and hold my ground and make sure that I'm a part of this community and I'm one of the faces that's here. And there's another part of me that's like, maybe I gotta go. Maybe this isn't my idea, my dream of what this is and where I thought it would be. It's just never gonna happen. And if you've grown up here and you've been here so long, the heartbreak is intensified because you've been here so long. If you've been here 10 years and you're complaining about how bad it is now, that's justified. But like, imagine like the majority of your life being here and all the changes you've seen. Like, it's pretty heartbreaking when you think, you know, I can't afford to live in a house in the neighborhood that I grew up in, you know. It's heartbreaking, you know. So where do I live? Where could I, if I decide to buy a house here, where could I live? It'd be so far north, so far south. What I'm looking for is that community vibe, that feeling. You know, you have families, you have something that's racially diverse, you have something that's diverse in terms of age. Like, that to me is what Cherrywood kind of represented, and I see families moving out. I see becoming a predominantly white neighborhood, predominantly affluent neighborhood, and it's different, you know, it's just really different.
So now speak to Mueller. What was it like as a child, and then what is that like now?
Nothing was out there. I think it's why my mom liked it so much, was it was affordable for her. I mean, she's single mother with, at that time there would have been 3 or 4 of us kids, and between her salary, my godmother's salary, you know, it was something affordable for them, and they were so excited they could do that, you know, but nothing was out there. I mean, we had airplanes flying overhead. No one wanted to live out there. And now everything's there. H-E-B being there. You should hear my mother complain about all the traffic, and we can't even turn out of her street without, you know, like, they need to be building traffic lights all down there because it's just completely unsafe, and people are racing to H-E-B at odd hours of the night, and it drives my mother insane. My mother has just loved having this little safe oasis for all of us, and now the traffic is so heavy there. We live in the little cul-de-sac, so we're even more isolated, and then all of a sudden that's really started to boom. But I'm sure there'd be a lot of great offers for my mother to sell her house, but I think she really, just with my siblings, who most of them have special needs, the idea of moving us would be really hard. You know, we're kind of really stuck, which I'm sure she'd like to be other places, but you know, that house has really been built and customized to my family. You know, it started out as a 5-bedroom house, but with 8 siblings, and most of them with special needs, all of the rooms have been adapted so that all of their equipment can live there. My elderly grandmother lives at home. Like, we have like a little compound, and it's safe, and everyone has what they need right there, so I don't see them moving too much. But yeah, I would imagine, I visit my mom a lot, so I am in that neighborhood. It's pretty close to where I live now, so I can easily get there. And there's some things that my mother, you know, loves having so close by. But again, with the increased foot traffic and not a lot of support when that kind of growth happens, it just seems like the city is very slow to make the changes that are needed to sustain that. Having enough people, enough teachers in the schools, enough, you know, people in all of the areas that are needed when you have a population boom like that. But yeah, she's stuck. So she's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. She's stuck.
So in the Cherrywood neighborhood, you said that it was, when you were a child, it was racially diverse, and you see it becoming more white. In the Mueller neighborhood, what were the demographics when you were a child, and what are they now?
I would say, you know, that's hard to say. I know in my school, Blanton was pretty much just Black and Latino. There were like a few white kids there, and those two groups, in my experience, were very segregated. And I assume everyone lived in the neighborhood, but that's my assumption, is that all those families were from that neighborhood. But I don't know now how that's changed. I mean, again, it's been since I've been an adult, so I don't know. It used to be just a lot of families, and I think more young people are moving into that neighborhood. I'm talking kind of like north of Mueller, because Mueller itself is just all brand new, cookie cutter, like Stepford Wives. Like, it's all new people that live there. But just north of that, you know, it seems like there's still a lot of families. I get the sense that it's not an area yet that's really had that same And I think also because the way the houses are built, they're these huge 3-bedroom houses. It's not really, other places I can see people building condos. I will be surprised when that becomes a place that becomes really developed in that way, you know. But yeah, I don't know that I get a sense of how much has changed there.
The boom maybe hasn't quite pushed itself there yet.
Yeah.
So before we were recording, you'd had some stories about Blanton, and they feel very on point for this oral history project. So I wonder if you can talk to me a little bit more about your experience at Blanton, your experience and understanding of race at Blanton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was saying that was a time when there was no getting around it. I was different. And that extended just from me by myself being mixed race and not looking any one particular race or the other, to then also my family, which was differently abled, and my 2 adoptive parents who were both white, and then I walk in and I look the way that I look, which is not like either parent. So it would be funny. It started out with one parent would drop me off, and the kids in school would, I think, form an opinion of like, oh, her dad's probably like this, or like, you know, she must look more like her dad. And then my dad would come pick me up in the evening, and then everyone was confused. And I was saying that it's a time that, you know, we're talking like late 80s, early 90s. And there just weren't a lot of alternative families. People didn't know about adoption. People weren't so used to seeing interracial families. And predominantly where like the parents are white and the children are different, you know, like that was a particular weird thing. And it was to the point where they had to call on counselors to talk with the students about adoption, and because really people didn't know what to make of it. And I don't know why I didn't have that conversation myself. I think maybe the adults just felt like it was time to step in and intervene. I think I probably tried to answer as many questions, but I was saying like, it's so normal to me. My family and my upbringing is so normal to me. It's all that I know is living in that family. So for me, when I see biological families, that's weird to me to see the same face on everyone. That's really weird. My family doesn't look like that at all. All of us are from different families, all different races. My siblings are African American and Latino and mixed race. They're all differently abled. I would say all of my siblings have special needs except for me. And so we joke that we look like a group home when we go out. Like people don't assume that we call ourselves a family, you know. And when I was younger, there was a lot of explaining that had to happen. And I was saying that like for children, it kind of makes sense, because I think as children we really do, I believe it comes from a really innocent place of like, you're different than me. And you see that when kids figure out gender and they're like, your body looks different than my mom, or whatever comments are made, and the parents get really embarrassed and have to have these conversations. But, you know, kids pick up on these differences. My skin is like this and yours is like this. And so I think that it can kind of start from an innocent place, but then you start to hear, I particularly remember it was like 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. There were a group of Black girls that I really, really wanted to be in with. I really just thought they were the coolest girls ever. And I was trying so hard to fit in with them. And they gave me such a hard time. They were not going to let me in. And they were constantly telling me, you're not Black enough. I was constantly not meeting whatever test that they had of what it meant to be Black. And it's funny now as an adult, because you look back and you're like, these are completely arbitrary things. Like, who were teaching them that, like, not being good in school, or like being on drill team, or like doing all these things are Black things, and that's what you must be able to meet that in order to be Black, when there are like, you know, so many people who are intelligent, so many people who are terrible at dancing, terrible at sports, who are Black. It's just, you know, I think there are things that parents and society kind of start to influence in children, and it starts to perpetuate in these ways. And for me, it was being told that I wasn't Black enough to be friends with this group of people. And that was really hurtful. And that was an age where I really was trying. I was trying to be what they wanted. And one of the things that they always got me, I wear my hair naturally, and I've always pretty much had it natural. And really cute because my mom had to take a class. She didn't know how to take care of my hair. They used to have this like, you know, black hair for white moms type of classes, and she totally would go and try to learn how to braid my hair and stuff. You know, I looked the way, and my mom did her best to braid my hair, but I didn't look black and their idea of what it was to be black. So I changed my hair. I was like, okay, I'll go and get my hair straightened. And that process, if you've never been through it before, is terrible. It's all of these chemicals. It's if you scratch your scalp, all of a sudden it's like your head's on fire. And you have to keep up with it. It's really expensive. You have to keep up with it. And if you don't, your hair starts to break off. So I threw myself, I mean, I'm a kid, and I threw myself into this. And for me, it was me trying to look like them, which I thought this was going to make me look black or make me be accepted by them. And in reality, it was like taking away, you know, my hair is absolutely African American. It's different textures in different places, but it's the one undeniable thing that's African American about my appearance. And to take that away, you know, didn't make me look more black. You know, it made me look maybe more Latina or some other thing. As an adult, I've had my hair like pressed for different events or things, and people think I'm like from all over the country and never what I am. But that was what the girls did, and so I straightened my hair to look just like them, and that was still not like enough to be accepted. You know, there were things about my personality that they didn't see as being black enough, or they just didn't like. But that was what my takeaway from it was like, okay, they have the idea of what it is to be black, and I'm not going to meet that, so I can't be black. I do think now, like as an adult, I'm like, man, if I had been in a place where the spectrum of black was a lot wider than that, wider, not whiter, how that might affect how would I identify now as an adult, because that early experience was really like, this is what it is, and if you are not this one thing, then you don't get to be a part of the group. I immediately switched over to a friend circle that was all Latina, all spoke just Spanish, like no English at all. So it was hilarious because I don't speak Spanish, and that has for me been a barrier definitely in terms of like the Latino community. Not everyone thinks this way, but a lot of people operate like if you don't speak the language, then you are not the thing. I don't speak the language, and my adopted parents will speak Spanish. My biological parents will speak Spanish. I mean, we are pretty removed from you know, original speakers. So I studied Spanish, and of course you hear it living in Texas, but that was, I mean, I think that certain group of girls were, you know, they were trying to let me into the group definitely, and who knows what they were saying. I have no idea. They spoke Spanish. I spoke English. I have no idea what they said. But they seemed to let me tag along and be their friend. And I would try to speak Spanish to them. But yeah, it was just, again, this like slight disconnect there. And mostly language, you know, I really just, I had no idea what anyone was saying. So that was kind of after leaving that experience when I moved on to another school. I think it was really clear to me that not like trying to be one thing didn't feel comfortable. It just didn't feel true. It just didn't feel honest to what I was. You know, it was denying some part of me that I knew existed. I know where I come from. I know both of my biological parents. For me to pick one box just did not seem to jive with the person that I was, you know. And I know a lot of people kind of see that. Like I was saying, I think the girls kind of thought it was fishy or like inauthentic for me to have an identity that was much more vague and fluid, like it wasn't honest or true. And but it's absolutely how I experienced life, you know. And so I think that's the seed of where, like growing into an adult, that's kind of where it started. Was like, okay, neither one of these things on its own feels authentic to me. What makes the most sense in my experience is to have, like I say, a mixed race, I say a multiracial, or mixed, even though I don't like that word. People understand immediately that my identity is blended, and that's what I choose to identify as. So yeah, I think it started with just kind of with both sides saying kind of like, okay, you got to pick this thing that you're going to be, and just one thing never felt correct, you know.
And then you said you went back to Maplewood, and that was like good old friends. Yeah, my friends there. Yeah, and that was pretty, I mean, I think probably would have been predominantly white, but I think that, I remember there being kids of all races there. I remember it being a lot more diverse than
Blanton was a really stark, like, there was, like, the one white kid in the hallway, like, whoa, there he is. You know what I mean? Like, wasn't that feeling at Maple when I came back. But, yeah, I didn't really, there weren't a lot of conversations about race in that way, you know? Yeah, so I was there with that group. It was more like, yeah, seeing the kids that I'd gone to preschool with again, because we all kind of went from preschool into elementary school, so there's still a lot of the kids still in the same neighborhood, hanging out together. And then a lot of us all went to Keeling for the magnet school. A lot of us were applying to go into that school together, and then that was weird, just because it was a neighborhood school, so there were kids from the Keeling neighborhood, East Side, which was all, I mean, predominantly Black, I would say, like, all people of color, hardly, and there was no one white on the East Side at all at that point in time. And
can you give me a, like, 80s, 90s?
This would have been, yeah, early 90s,
okay.
I want to say. Yeah, because I started high school in 96. I graduated in 2000. Yeah, so it would have been like 93, 92, something like that, 94. No, 94, 95, there's math. But yeah, so it was a neighborhood school, but then everyone from the magnet schools were like bussed into this neighborhood that we didn't live in, essentially. And I was saying that the experience there was very much, I mean, race and class are so tied together, but in terms of the classes, that felt really separate, because you had the kids in the neighborhood were all pretty much from lower income families. And then you had all of the magnet kids who were, a lot of them from very affluent families, and then sort of some middle class kids in there as well. And we were academically completely separate. And then we had a couple shared classes, like gym and dance and drama, things like that. But it was just a really weird experience to be a person of color in the magnet program. My interact, I don't have any specific memories, but I remember as a kid feeling like, this is kind of weird that we're all being bussed in here, and we don't interact hardly at all with each other. And the way that the teachers treat a magnet student versus a student in the neighborhood is very, very different, you know. And there were like, you know, security guards on campus, and, you know, we didn't have a crap at my school, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have that we didn't have that stuff at all. So it's just sort of like, what's weird about, you know, kind of made you on your guard a little bit, like, what's different about where we are now, you know? And I think it's just, when kids are of that age and are people of color, they're seen as being threatening. Really, they're seen as like, there's going to be a lot of crime, there's going to be a lot of gang violence and things like that. And it was like a little bit of that, I want to say, at Planted and maybe Maplewood. I remember going to school with a girl who wanted to be in a gang, but there really wasn't. I think in like the old Mueller neighborhood, there were Crips and Blood stuff going on, but my exposure to that was very, very minimum. It was like one girl I went to school with who talked about that. But yeah, all of a sudden, that was really culture shock being in that school. And I did not do well. I was always really loved school, loved being there, and that school just broke me. It was not the place for me at all. And my parents took me out immediately. After I finished, I went into private school at Huntington, Surrey, which is sort of mama's school to Griffin now. And that was a predominantly white school. And I think I just was so relieved to be out of, like, again, the conversations about race there. There were really weird things where I would be on my soapbox actually a lot in high school, just because kids would say stuff. This happens, I think, to a lot of people that are mixed race, but someone will say something not realizing that you are part of that thing, or that you just give a shit and, like, that's offensive. But people would say stuff like, oh, my parents have Mexicans working on their yard, and da-da-da-da, and say something, and I would go, well, hold on a second. You know, you can't say all Mexicans are like that. Maybe that one Mexican guy who works for your dad is like that, but you cannot say stuff like that. So I have a couple memories like that where I was like, soapbox time, and usually race would sometimes be homophobia, sexism. Those are all the things that people just say comments and not realize that it bothered someone else in the room, because it was like, oh, if they aren't in the room, I can say whatever I want. Well, no, you know, it bothered me, and so I made a lot of friends. I'm joking. I made no friends. I had a couple of friends, but I was saying that system was much more like, are you a weirdo who like dyes your hair and like listens to alternative rock, or are you a prep and you listen to rap? And I didn't, I was definitely in the weirdo camp, so.
So those were, your formative years.
Yes.
And sort of formative impressions of Austin and the way you experienced Austin and moved through the world. And so now I wonder if you can talk to sort of your adult life. And as much as these students that you referred to at Blanton were cautious about your multiracial heritage, has that bled into your adult life, or just kind of speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I would say that now, I was saying that the racism is very subtle, or the comments that happen are really, they're trying to ask a particular question, but they work in a weird way around it. One of the things formed very early on was like understanding that I was different. And once I accepted that, because as a young kid, I just kept being like, I'm like everyone else. Everyone's like, there's nothing weird about me. And then once I kind of got over that, I was like, okay, I'm really different, and just kind of owned that a little bit more. So I was more prepared when people would ask me. People constantly ask me, what are you? And they'll find different avenues to ask that. And as an adult, they're more sneaky about how they ask that. But you can tell when people, like, they have to know what you are first before they can move forward in the conversation. Like they have to form this opinion of you, and you can tell with some people it is based on what you look like and what you are, what you're considered. So I experience that more now, more than like comments. Although I do still, and I remember now the thing I was going to say before, there are still experiences I've had where people not only asking the question, which is uncomfortable. I mean, just imagine living your normal day and then like random people coming up to you asking you what you are, and like wanting to have a conversation about your racial background. And and with my case, so involves my family and other things that are just personal. It's not just like, what are you? It's like, there's a whole story behind this. I don't always want to get into it, especially if you're a complete stranger and I don't know you and I don't know why you're asking that. And so I would often put it back on the person, like, why do you need to know that? Or I would get really sassy and try to educate them about the words that they were using. Like, if you're asking for my nationality, I'm an American and I'm just the same as you. And so I would be all angsty and sassy with people about it, because I didn't always feel like it was my job to be mixed race ambassador to everyone, As an adult, I'm a little bit more, I think I try to be a little more playful, and a little bit more, use my sense of humor a little bit more to educate a little bit, or just to make it easier on myself, because it starts to get to you when you're like, man, like that's all people see. And there's a lot of good images that people are quote unquote good that is associated, like, oh, you've got the good hair, you've got the lighter skin, all guys like you, or like, women that are mixed race. If you're mixed, you're like this magical thing, but it's hard for me to see it in that way. To me, it just feels really gross. It's like, it's still looking at a person and not really seeing who they are, and not really like, because you can't see who someone is. You have to know them. You have to talk to them. You have to engage with them. And it misses the person that I actually am. It's looking at something. I have nothing to do with the way that I look. You know what I mean? I came out in the world and that's what I look like. That's how I move. So there's like that positive, like, oh, you're like this eroticizing and making this exotic thing that you are, and you're just a person. And then there's the opposite end of it, of like people saying really negative things about my choice to have a blended identity. It's like, well, why don't you want to be this, and like, what's wrong with being Black? What's wrong with being just Latino? Why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? And people who, to the most extreme, I've had people who just outright say, this is what you are. They're like, you're Black. This is what it is. This is what you need to call yourself, basically. This is how you need to identify. As a kid, it was like, you've got to do this, and then you got to dress this way, you got to talk this way, like really, really ridiculous, like, descriptors of how they identified Black. But as an adult, mostly I would say like that extreme has come from family. That has not come from people on the street. Are curious. Usually they see me, it can be white people and Black people. They see that I'm mixed race, and I think that it comes from, that childlike, innocent question of like, you're different than me, and I want to know about that. But my experience of that isn't always so warm and fuzzy. Again, sometimes I just am not in the mood to have that conversation, and I just want to go on to my other thing. People will assign this like, you're my black friend, and I have to stop and go, wait a second. I don't identify as just black. So like, you thinking that you're talking to a black person and you're getting the black person experience, understand that I'm mixed race. So like, my experience is really different when you talk to someone who is identified as being black. But I would never, if someone identifies me as black, I don't really tell them that they're wrong. You know, it's not incorrect. Like what I say is not incorrect to say that I'm black. It's not incorrect to say that I'm Latino. I'm absolutely those things, but I just don't have a monoracial, like, one thing. That's not, at the end of the day, how I see myself. But as an adult, I was saying, like, as an adult, yeah, you see these people who are itching. They've got to know before they move forward. And that really bothers me. And it's when people are just in your face about stuff, you can be in your face right back at them. It's hard to subtly let them know what they're saying is weird, or like put it back on them and say, why is it so important to you to know before we can really be friends and really get to know each other? You've got to place me in this way. I think it's just because a lot of the way that they form opinions of other people are so tied to that, you know, and a lot of times you're not getting that person like in the room with you in that moment. They're bringing in something like, I met this girl this one time and she treated me this way and she looked like you. So I'm first testing to see, are you going to be like that girl? Or like, are all people going to be this way? You know, and people who really do move through the world with like this, like all black people are this and all Asian people are this. And that's how they operate, you know, and that's what bothers me the most is people identifying, like people telling people what their label is. That just is like wrong. No one should do that ever. And two, that like you have this blanket stereotype of what someone is, for better or worse. I mean, you could even, again, exoticize it in this way that maybe it's supposed to be positive. Maybe you're saying, oh, I get this a lot. Oh, mixed race people are beautiful. I want to have a mixed race baby. Oh my God. You know, just like, you're not seeing the person here. You have this like idea of what this means, and the value you've assigned to it is that it's high value, that it's you know, whatever it is, but it's still missing the point of like, there's a human being inside that body, there's a human spirit inside there, and you're completely obsessed with something that has nothing to do with that, or you're seeking it in a negative way and you assign this like negative connotation with it. I hate all people that are this way, or they're not smart, or they can't do this, and you don't allow for the fact that human beings are way more complex than these labels that we have for people. But yeah, I was joking that I experience this a lot. A lot of these conversations happen on public transportation, on the bus. There's a lot of times when people want to kind of test that with me. And then, yeah, when I do say I'm mixed race, then I get some pushback about like, well, why do you pick that? Why do you pick a blended identity? Why don't you just want to be black? Why don't you just want to be this other thing? My birth mother did say to me, she was like, you're black, you know, that's what you are. And for you to say anything else is not right, basically, you know, and that's really hard to hear, you know, from someone who's my family, basically. We're not in, you know, aren't in contact with each other, for a lot of reasons, but, you know, that's not for someone else to tell me, really. At the end of the day, it's for me. What is my experience moving through? What makes the most sense? What feels the most authentic to me? And being mixed race, or saying that I'm mixed race, that makes the most sense right now. I did mention too, like, there's the experience if you're a person of color at a white rock show. You definitely feel that here in Austin, I would say, because we're such a music obsessed community, that those are the times when I start to feel that sensitivity of like, where are all the other people of color in this room, you know? I feel that in arts events. I feel it a lot in our art community, where I'm like, where are all the other artists of color? Like, there's more people here making stuff, so where is that? And where's the audience for that? You know, when you do go to an event that's maybe a culturally specific, like Mexican American event or whatever it is, and you're like, where is everyone? You know, you feel that a lot here, because I think as much as we have a lot of pride in terms of our city, but the ways that we're growing, it's not growing for everyone. It's growing for, it seems, predominantly businesses and developers, and the primary population that are moving in are all affluent white people. And when that happens, where does everyone go? You know what I mean? When that gentrification happens, where are those families going? And we're reading a lot about people who just move or just go, they sell their home, and that's really sad to me that this growth doesn't include, I mean, like, yeah, let's increase the population with lots of people from all over. Like, let's increase the population so that it's like racially diverse, you know what I mean? And that we see walking down the street and like, let's make it look like New York. Like, I love that. I love going to New York. I love how different everyone is. Like that kind of growth, that kind of, you got people all living on top of each other who can barely afford where they're living and can't make art. Let's make it look like that. Like, let's not like be in this sort of homogenous zone of like everyone just kind of looks the same, is kind of interested in the same things. Like, let's really diversify. And it can be in a racial way, but then like, let's really diversify the types of artists, the types of businesses, the types of people that we have here, because this growth, it's creepy in a way that like, if this is this ideal place everyone wants to move, and what that means to people, which has historically been an affordable place to buy a home, have a yard, have a house, make art, or do your business or whatever it is. And that's suddenly not an available dream for everyone. What does that say about the dream? I mean, the dream realized is very different, I think. I'm saying that it's heartbreaking when you've grown here, you've lived here the majority of your life, and your ideas of what it would be. My ideas moving back to Texas is like, oh great, I'm going to think about buying a house, like maybe I'm going to have a family there, maybe I'm going to have an affordable way that I can do my day job and then create the art that I want to work, and people will come see that art. And being back, it's like, oh man, those resources, all of those resources that I thought would be available to me are pretty scarce, and they continue to get more and more scarce as time goes on. So that's the downside of all of this growth, is that it's a specific kind of growth for a specific kind of people, and it just seems like I don't know, it just seems, it's like, what do? Do I leave? Do I also just say, okay, I can't live here, it's not going to have what I want it to be? Do I try to stay and try to make those changes and try to, for a while it's felt like that, like, hold your ground, like, don't be that person that moves away, be that person who's like, I'm a townie, I grew up here, I'm from here, let me let people know that this is what an Austinite looks like, you know what I mean? And this is the type of work an Austin artist makes, for example. We're so renowned for all of the work as artists that we make outside of here, and yet all those people don't live here or aren't from here, and they come in and they leave, or they're here just for school and then they go, or whatever it is. But it's a dicey thing. I don't know which way it's going to turn out. I do kind of hope. It's felt like this small pool where you can be experimental and you can have space to figure out what you want to do. And I hope it continues to feel that way. But the interests of big business and the interests, of these developers, I don't think has any of that in mind at all. This is about making money, and it doesn't matter who lives there, doesn't matter who they're displacing to do that. It's about making money at the end of the day. So I think it's up to people like the artists and people who are activists and people who work for the city to push back on that and say, there are other interests that our city has. And that's the big question. Are there other interests that our city has other than making a lot of money? So we know we can make a lot of money, and we continue to make a lot of money, but can we push back on the other side too? And like, we want to make art here, we want to have a community that's diverse, that's open, we want other things for this oasis. Otherwise, let's just move to Dallas. Why not live in Dallas? Why not live in Houston? Why is like placing it just in Austin? This is a place where, like, the hippies would come to do their weirdo music. You know what I mean? Like it has embedded in its identity of this place that's very open, and yet you don't really experience that. You don't see that. Again, walking down the street, you don't see that. You see one type of person walking down the street, and it's terrifying. Did I answer?
Yeah, and actually, yeah, that's really great. Okay. And I guess just the last thing is, if you're looking at this as, a chance to have an influence on the histories that are written and that are recorded, like, this is your opportunity. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or say or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of rambled about I think it's important to not place a label on someone, let people tell you if they choose to, and you might meet people who just don't want to have that conversation for whatever reason. Just walk away. Walk away, go home and think whatever you want to think and say whatever you want to say. But in the presence of other people, let them identify and be open to the idea that people are so much more complex than any label or stereotype that you could give a person. And I would say, specific to Austin, man, yeah, I'm really fearful that this will not be a final home for me, and I'm fearful that I'm hopeful to combat that. I'm hopeful that I'm going to be surprised by who does move here and who does make this a home and who does make art here and make space for other people here, because it would just be really a shame, it would be a shame to see. I know every generation thinks that about Austin, and it's changing, or all these things are being lost, but I've lived here a majority of my lifetime, so I feel like I've really seen these changes happen, and they've been really quick in the last couple of years, and that's what's also scary about it. It's different when it's stretched out over time. You're a little more used to it, or it's a little less of a blow. But how quickly it's happening, I hope it kind of slows down a little bit, and we have some time to catch up to it a little bit, catch our breaths to it. I can't think of anything really else, Yeah, and I think just being mindful of the conversations that we have with children is huge in education, and I think that intervention is such a powerful one. It takes a lot of time. It's not an immediate change that you see, but being able to talk to children in a way where you just allow for lots of different people, and that can mean anything. I mean, we're talking about race, but that really can mean anything. Just letting children be open to the idea that our life is much more fluid than these boxes we want to put people in. It'll just be easier. It's a great strategy for life, in general, if you can be more fluid and accepting of change and of things that are different than you entering in your life. I think you're set up for everything life has to throw at you, but I think we get really trapped when we start saying, okay, this is the way it must be. A woman must be like this, and a Black woman must be like this, and a Black woman who's young must be like this. I mean, I think those categories are really, really limiting. I also think it's, for a lot of people, the only way that they understand the world. They can't see it any other way, and that's how they understand it. But if you could start with children, they still have their lifetime to get hip to what's going on and make decisions for themselves. But if you can start with that intervention of there are people who are different than you, and being mindful of the way that you talk to them and the way that you have these conversations about race, because I think people are just really careless and really don't realize the way that what they're saying is harmful or offensive.
Thank you, Adrienne.
Yeah.